So good to see
Hi.
you.
You too.
Um,
How are you?
I'm good. Thank you
Good.
for joining me as my first guest. I'm very excited to speak with you and help you get your story out there to help others because you will help.
I am excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. So tell me a little bit about yourself, how old you are, where you from, what do you do as a career?
So I live on Long Island and I am 30, I just turned 35 years old. I do full-time real estate, so I'm always busy. But yeah, that's like the bullet points.
The quick and dirty version.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool. How did you meet your partner?
Okay. So this is, I don't want to say a long story, but I guess like a really nice story, and it helps, um, I guess, restore a lot of people. But in 2018, I was actually engaged to get married. I was living down in the DC area working, actually in Baltimore. And my fiance was hit and killed in a car accident.
Oh,
Yeah, so
I'm so
when
sorry to
he had
hear
passed away, thank you. When he had passed away, I moved back to Long Island. I started over, and because I have family here, I grew up here. And when I started over, obviously, like you don't date right away, and you give yourself time to heal. So he passed away the end of April. I went to Paris and like London and Ireland with my now sister-in-law, that my brother married, and had the best trip, and I fell in love with Paris. So exactly a year later, I took my mom. We went to Paris, and I just like loved the city so much. But I was like starting to dip. Like I went on like 2 dates and whatever, and started dipping my foot into the pool. Now here we are, like almost about a year and a half later, and I pulled up Hinge, and I wanted to see just like honestly what characters are in Paris, because there's a lot of characters here in the United States.
that.
So like what kind of characters are we talking about over there? So I put it for my location in Paris, and my now husband popped up all the way on Long Island.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
What are
so
the
I'm
odds? Isn't
I'm
that a
crazy.
location-based app?
Yeah. So he was at work over here on Long Island, and I thought he was so cute. So like I showed him to my mom, and I was like, "Look, don't you think he's cute?" And she's like, "He likes the outdoors and he likes to hike." She's like, "Stephanie, you don't like any of that." I was like, don't worry about it. It's fine. Don't worry." So I messaged, I like liked his whatever. He messaged me. We talked, and then like I got home, I think like Monday, and like he took me out Tuesday. And then the rest is history. And then in 2022, we actually I went back to Paris with him, and he proposed in Paris.
So
So
beautiful.
thank you. So it's like it's a little bit of like an unconventional story, but like I love to tell the whole, I guess, story, because at the end of the day, like it all goes into each other. And like if I hadn't have lost my late fiance, I would have never met my now husband. And I always say like he's the one who honestly like healed my heart.
Yeah.
He really,
Aw,
really has. So he's amazing. And then we got married at the end of 23. So
amazing. Thank you
thank
for sharing. That's such a
you.
unique story, and it seems like it was meant to be.
Thank you. Yes, I truly believe so too.
Yeah.
I do.
Aw.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into the reason why you're here.
Okay.
Um, Wherever you feel comfortable with
Mhm.
starting.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear about your ectopic pregnancy story.
Sure. So my husband and I got married the end of 2023, December, and we we didn't want to start trying to have children, although I'm 35, so I wish I had started when I was younger, but we just weren't in that place yet. And we truly love, you know, I hate to say this, like it sounds horrible, but like, we propped out on the couch yesterday, like, in the middle of the afternoon, and I was like, oh, this is so nice. And like, but we were ready to start a family, but just not right away, not after we got married. So we ended up going to Cabo for our honeymoon, but
Fine.
in October. Yeah, so like almost, I want to say almost like 10 months later. And we decided like that is when we were going to try, is when we're in Cabo.
Mhm.
So I have like the most consistent period of my like of I'm very lucky, like very, very lucky. So my period comes like every 28 days on the same day. Like I remember the first day I got it, like, when I was 12, like June 1st, 2002, like I remember. And it has come every month. So I, you know, I talk to my therapist a lot about this, and because I am older, I have seen people who have gone through infertility, who have gone through loss, who have gone through, not wanting children or wanting children. And I've been like, I feel like if I was in my 20s, I'd be a little more naive about things, but like
Right.
I'm not. So I'm very aware. Um, and so when we started trying, I was tracking my cycle, and we ended up getting pregnant in Cabo, which was amazing.
Mhm.
Um, and I had tested positive November 4th. So I was about 5 weeks pregnant around that time.
Mhm.
And I started getting this like aching on my left side, and I wasn't sure, and I've never had been pregnant before. And although I have known, every spectrum of pregnancy and people and my friends and my family and everyone around me, when you go through it yourself, it's like lonely because everyone's
Yeah.
body is so different.
Right.
So
Right. And you're the
I
only one that knows about it, really, at those
exactly.
really early stages.
Exactly. So I was getting this like aching on my side. We live with my parents because the housing market is insane. And although I'm like a real estate agent, we're getting beat out like crazy,
Mhm.
So we live with my parents. So I can't keep a secret. So we had to tell my parents. So we told my parents the next day. They were very excited. And then like that weekend, I got like a weird, like, I want to say like a weird gas bubble on my left side, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
And it was like a popping feeling. And I just didn't think like, I was like, okay, maybe like I have gas, like I took a gas axe, like maybe it's whatever. Um, and then that was like over the weekend. And then Tuesday, I remember getting off the phone with someone I work with, and I was like, yeah, thank God I'm like not bleeding. I was like, I have this weird ache, but I'm not bleeding. I go to the bathroom and I'm spotting. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like,
Oh,
okay.
no.
I'm like, I'm not going to freak out. I'm like, maybe this is implantation bleeding, but that should have happened already. And like, your
Yeah.
mind spirals.
Well, and you do all the
So,
Googling, and of course, the only things you find on Google are the negatives.
exactly.
Crazy.
Exactly. So I was like, all right. So I waited until Wednesday, and I ended up going to the hospital just to like make sure and whatever. And I remember like my friends, I have a group of like widows. We all lost around the same time, and we've been friends now for almost 7 years, which is crazy. And I remember texting them, and they were actually probably the first people that knew I was pregnant because I took the test and I I just sent it to them right away because they know everything about me and my life.
Yeah.
So I remember them saying like, "Oh, let us know if you see anything on the sonogram, like, you're gonna whatever." So I went into that hospital room and like they did the sonogram, and I remember just like not seeing anything in my uterus. And I was like, this is interesting. So my numbers were only at like 205.
Okay.
So my numbers are at 205. So they were like, listen, it could just be very small and we're not able to see it. So come back on Friday and we will test your HCG, see if that goes up. And I'm like, okay. And at this point, I had switched OBs because I didn't like my old one, and the new
Mhm.
one wouldn't see me because I never established care. So
Okay.
I had to go to the hospital.
So,
And also they say anything, I think under like 20 weeks, you go to the hospital anyway, because then God forbid, like you need something, you know.
right.
Um,
So, Stephanie,
so I,
when you
yeah,
went to the hospital, that's when they did your first round of HCGs?
yes, yeah,
Okay.
that's when they tested me first. So that was when I first, so like the number. So I was at
Mhm.
like 205, and then I went Friday, I just got my HCG tested and I was at 396. So like I didn't like double, but I didn't not double, if that made sense, it was rising, quote unquote, appropriately.
Right.
So I felt good. I was like, all right, this is fine. And I was only spotting like when I like wiped. I wasn't like on a pad, like not on a pad, like nothing. So
Mhm.
I worked. I felt great. Sunday we were celebrating my grandma's 90th, and I went to her house, and I'm like sitting on the floor with my niece, and like I'm like, I don't feel like right. So I got up, I went to the bathroom, and I bled like period blood. So
Wow.
I was like, all right. So I was like, this isn't normal. It was not clotty. And the thing is like I wasn't cramping. I wasn't like feeling like, you get like they say like shoulder pain or like
Mhm.
I wasn't feeling anything. I was just
Right.
literally spotting.
Yeah.
So the spotting had gone away like an hour later. So then Monday I went to the hospital again, and my HCG was like at 1100 and change. So it had
Okay.
rose. It
Yeah.
tripled from Friday. So I was like, okay, this is
Right.
great. Like, the
Yeah.
nurse was like, your numbers are great and whatever. And I was like, yeah, let's just make sure it's in the right spot. And she's like, oh my God. She's like, stop. She's like, don't don't stress until we have to stress. And I'm like, I know, I just think something is wrong.
Yeah. You
So
know
they
your
take me
body the
for
best.
exactly. So they take me for a sono and they don't see anything. And I'm like waiting in the room, and my husband, who luckily he paints and spackles for that hospital. He has like a full-time union gig. So like he was able to like be in the room with me and not, like have to like leave me. Um the doctor came in and he had like no bedside manner. And he just came in and he's like, we can't see anything inside your uterus. We think it's stuck outside your uterus. I'm sending in the gynecologist. And I'm like, okay. And like my husband's like, what does that mean? And I'm like, it probably means it's an ectopic pregnancy. Like that's the way, that's how I think.
Yeah.
So he sends in the gynecologist, and it's a teaching hospital. So,
Wow.
I had like three people up my cooch at
Right.
once. It was lovely.
Right.
Um,
Right. It's not
so they
anything
checked
you
me.
want to happen.
Exactly. When my husband complains when he goes to the doctor, I'm like, you don't know what it's like, kid.
No.
Um,
Women go through
totally
so
doesn't.
much.
Oh my God. And like I hate going to the doctor, but then it's like amazing like how when you are put in this position, like you want your baby to be okay, you want you to be okay, and you're just like, okay, I'll go spread eagle. I don't care.
Yeah.
Um
Anything.
so I Yeah, exactly. So they come in, they check me, they're like, you're thickening appropriately, like there's no blood, like, other than like your spotting, there's no like blood in your abdomen. Like, so there's two options. One, we can terminate it, or two, we can like I had my OB appointment for the following Tuesday, and this was the Monday
Mhm.
before.
Uh-huh.
So they're like, your OB will send in scripts for blood work, and then she'll sonogram you on Tuesday. So it's like, okay, November 26th. So I'm like, okay, no problem. I'm like, well, I'm not going to terminate something that I want. Like, I want
Yeah.
my baby.
Yeah.
So they were like, okay, no problem. And they weren't forcing me to, which, like, thank God.
Yeah.
Sorry, the sun is like beaming. Um,
At least the
and
sun's out, right?
yeah,
Out
exactly.
in Michigan too, which is nice.
It's so nice. And it's just very windy here, like very, very windy.
Yeah.
Um so I was like, okay. So I went the following I went Monday. My HCG was like 1103 or something like that.
Okay.
I went to the
11.
lab on Tuesday. 1100. Like
Okay. Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
1100. So it wasn't very high, but it
Right.
was there.
Right.
So I went to the lab and I got my HCG pulled again and my progesterone. So my progesterone was at like 5.7.
Okay.
So I obviously again Googled, researched, and I was like, it should
Yep.
be higher, like,
Yep.
whatever. So my blood went from like 1100 and change to like 1523. So it did not go up like crazy, but it was only 24 hours and it's supposed to obviously double.
Right.
So the doctor calls me Thursday after I got my blood taken, and we hadn't had results yet. And she's like, don't stress. She's like, you just hit 1500 HCG. She's like, usually we don't see anything until that level. So
Okay.
she's like, so when you come in Tuesday, she's like, we will sonogram you and everything will be fine. And I'm like, okay. So I got
But
to rally progesterone.
I was just
What?
going to jump in and
Yeah.
say the waiting game is one of the worst parts because your
It
mind
was,
just
yeah.
continues to think about it, continues to
Yeah.
think and hope that
Yeah.
everything will be okay. But there's a part of you that continues to just think negatively and
Mhm.
think
Yeah.
that all the things that could possibly be going on.
Yeah. So my husband, bless his heart, was like so positive through this whole thing. And he's like, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And I'm like, I know. And he's like, it's fine. We're going to have our baby. And I'm like, it's not like, your body. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
it's not going to be okay. But I was trying to hold on hope as much as I can. So the waiting game, like you said, was terrible. So like here I am. I get a call from her Thursday. She's like, your numbers look good, blah, 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 whatever. Let's see what your numbers are tonight or into tomorrow and we'll talk. So she's like, but I'll see you on Tuesday. So I'm like, okay. So after I had gotten off the phone with her, I felt better. Because she said my progesterone was like right. She's like, I've only seen like on my hands of doing this, like, 5 people be over 20 or whatever it is. She's like, usually it's between like 5 and 11. So she's like, you're at 5.7, like we'll monitor it, whatever. So I felt really good.
Yeah.
And I love to cook. So like I got up, I started cooking, like I was fine. It was great. Friday comes, I'm positive. I'm like, all right. And then Saturday comes and I remember like looking at my mom and I was like, something inside of me. I said, if I make it to Tuesday, I said, I just know it's not going to be good news. And she's like, don't say that. It's going to be fine. I'm like, no, I know it's not going to be good news. So Sunday, I went to the pizzeria that we have here and I adore the girl who owns it. And I told her I was pregnant. She hugged me and I was just like, I was like, I'm going Tuesday. I don't know, whatever. So as I'm leaving the pizzeria, I have this like uncontrollable gas pain. Like, I don't know, like just I was keeled over. Like I went to the bathroom and I was like keeled over, but I wasn't bleeding. I wasn't cramping. So I really thought it was gas. So
Yeah.
I sat on the couch. My brother and my sister-in-law were moving. So we had their closing the next day. So like I wasn't trying to make this about me at all because it's a very exciting and special day for them. So the pain went away. I went to bed. Everything was fine. I felt good. I slept the night. Everything was good. And Monday the 25th, I woke up and I had like 2 dots on my pad. And I was like, okay. I was like, I'm going to kind of panic because I never had anything on my pad before. So I called the doctor and the doctor's like, if you are not bleeding through the pad, like you are okay. We'll see you tomorrow. I confirmed with them. I go to my brother's closing and my stomach is like not great. So my dad was there with us and he's like, do you want to go to Chick-fil-A for lunch? And I was like, yeah, let's go. I gotta eat. I'm starving. Maybe I'm like hungry. Maybe it's a hunger pain. I don't know. So I go to Chick-fil-A and I'm like, you know what? Let me run to the restroom. I run to the restroom. And this is so silly. So like I was wearing the same outfit, washed obviously, the same outfit I was wearing a week earlier to my grandma's little birthday party to the closing. And I told my husband, I said, throw it out. I was like, because every time I'm wearing this, I'm bleeding. Like, throw it out. I don't want to wear it.
Oh, wow.
So like the little things, like those like little suspicions that you have.
Yeah.
So I go to the restroom. My dad's like getting the food, and I like wipe. It's a lot of blood now. Like now, it's like a lot of blood. And I look into the toilet, and it's just like my urine was all blood. So I was like,
Yeah.
I have to go to the hospital. I was like,
Was it
I
bright red?
cannot. It was like bright red, and it was just
Yeah.
like I was like, I have to go to the hospital. So my husband came and picked me up. My dad went back to work. My husband came pick me up because he works there. So we wanted like one car. We didn't want to like have 2 cars at the hospital. And thank God too. they got me right in. They gave me some Tylenol and like a heat pack. And they're like, we're gonna do a sauna. So, and all they do, like when you go in, and like all they do is like press on your belly, tap on your back, and like I'm like, this doesn't hurt. Like,
Mhm.
like this
Yeah,
cannot be how you like, determine it. And prior to that, I kept complaining about that ache on my left side.
right.
And they kept going, oh, it's your colon, things shift during pregnancy and it's your colon. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't know. I was like,
And
it's something.
you said you felt like that from the beginning. There was
Yeah.
always something on that side.
And I was like, maybe I slept like, when you sleep and you like kind of pull your muscle. Like, I just
Yeah.
didn't know, but there was always that ache on my left side. So they took me in for a sono. I'm like bleeding like crazy. The doctor comes in and she's like, it's ectopic. And I was like, I know, I read my chart. Like, because they have that like follow my health thing. Like, you can go on and see. And like, they had found it in my left tube. So she said, she's like, we can either give you the shot of I can't even it's
That's a
mex
Trexie.
Mexotrexate. I call it Mexocitrate. I don't know why. Mexotrexate. And they said like we could either give you that shot or we have to make sure there's like no free fluid. So I was like, okay. So they come back and she's like, we got to prep you for surgery. So now at this point, I'm like, okay, they're like, you ruptured, you're internally bleeding, like you need to get
Wow.
into surgery. So I'm like, okay. And I'm like, my phone's on like 6%.
Gosh.
And my mom's like, what's going on? My brother's like, what's going on? My husband's like trying to play, whatever. We're very close. Like, I'm Greek and Armenian, so like there is no personal space.
Yeah.
So like,
Were you by
and
yourself?
what happened?
Were you by yourself?
No, so my husband was with me.
Oh, okay.
And my husband was with me, and then I told him to go home and pack a bag because they said that I was going to stay the night from surgery and all that. So he was like, okay. So he went home, packed a bag, and we're only like 20 minutes from the hospital. We're not very far. And so in the interim of him going, they like came in and were like gown up, and I was like, but like my husband, like I'm not going into surgery without seeing my husband.
Yeah.
Luckily he works in the hospital, so he has his badge, and he can get access into every department. Like obviously he can't come into the like OR when I'm in the OR, but like the PACU, like where they prep you and all of that, he was able to just like come right up, and then for recovery he was able to be there. So I have never seen my husband cry. I Every time I looked at him, I cried because I knew this was like the best thing of our life. And he went home as he was grabbing the bag. I called him and I was like, I have 5% left. I was like, but I was like, they're gonna take me. He's like, all right, I'll meet you in the PACU. I know exactly where to go. So he came right away, came back, they prepped me. I just remember like they do like a pre-surgical bath, and like I just remember like I just like had to wipe. I was like bleeding and it was like bright red and it just did not stop. And of course, like I joke and like I am that person because trauma has changed me completely.
Yeah.
And like luckily though, the OB that I was going to see came to do the surgery.
Oh,
So
that's really
I was
nice.
like, yeah, I was very, very lucky. She was on call and just very lucky to have her do the surgery instead of like an attending at the hospital.
Right.
Because you wake up to hear like these horror stories. And she said, she's like, we're most likely gonna remove your tube. She's like, but I have to go in to your right side, your left side, and through your belly button. She's like, because sometimes on the sono the images get flipped. So she's like, I'm not truly convinced that your ectopic is on your left. I think it might be on your right. And I was like, but everything leads to the left. But okay, like whatever. So at that point, I'm like, I don't care. Like whatever
Yeah.
you got to do, just do. They give you that whole like we might have to do a bikini line and like the cut or whatever. Luckily, I didn't have to have that, but they prepped me. I said goodbye to my husband, and they just like I just remember being like wheeled in. And one of our friends just recently had surgery and like for his like gallbladder, and like I remember laying in bed over the weekend, and not even over the weekend, like I think it was like Tuesday he had surgery, so like before he had surgery a week ago, and I just remember like replaying everything in my mind, and I'm like the lights, the everything.
Right. Right.
And they had
Those visuals stick with you
like
so
crazy,
vividly. Yeah.
crazy. So I remember waking up from surgery. I remember hearing them say she needs more meds, she needs more meds. And then in true me fashion, they said like she needed more fentanyl. And I just like literally looked at them and I was like, it's not from over the border, right? They're like, no, Stephanie. And I was like, okay. And my husband's like, okay, she's back. Like she's aware, she's back, like she's okay. And I'm like, you
Oh,
hear that word and it's like a scary word and people get
it is.
addicted to it. And like,
Yeah.
to me, I would have told them to like not give that to me. Not that I have an addictive personality, but you get
Right.
so scared and like you hear so
Yeah.
many things. So
You never know what could happen.
you never know. So luckily, knock on wood, we're good. But yeah, so then they sent me home that night, which was crazy. Um, and so my husband drove us home. It was like midnight or like 1 o'clock in the morning. And everyone was like great, but then like the recovery is what was a wild. Like that week in my life was wild. Or like 2 weeks was insane. It was the waiting game and then all of that happening. But the recovery was like, I don't know. That was probably the hardest thing because you're mentally going through it. And like,
Right.
while you're mentally going through it, when you're experiencing it, your mind is in fight or flight mode. And it's just like, just get me better. I know I can't save my baby, which really hurts and sucks, but like, just get me better. Like I need to, like my husband put it best. He's like, at some point it didn't become about the baby anymore and it became about saving your life. And I was like, I
Yeah.
know.
Exactly it. And I think
Like,
you touch on the mental part of recovery because yes, the physical recovery is really hard.
yeah.
But and at least for me, the mental recovery was even harder than the
Yes.
physical.
Yeah.
And you're right, you're in fight or flight mode. And to me, those first initial weeks of recovery, it's almost like I was just trying to unsee and
Yeah.
the entire
Do.
experience because I was trying to get better.
Exactly.
And a lot
100%.
of a lot of the things didn't hit me until later on about like,
Yeah.
oh, I just went through something really traumatic.
Right. Yeah. And like that's where I feel like too, like in the beginning, like, my husband came home with flowers like 2 days later, and then my friends all like sent me things. And because
Oh, that's
I'm like very like if something happens, like you need your army. And like
mhm,
I would have never gotten like through the death of my fiance if I didn't have my army. And like I still
mhm.
have that army to this day. And while we all have experienced all of it, and just the people like showing up, like my best friend, my maid of honor, sitting with me on the couch like the night after my surgery, my cousin coming over, like, you know, I almost feel in a weird way guilty because I don't feel like I neglected my husband, but like everyone was there for me.
Yeah.
Um, but we needed that. We needed the people coming over. We needed to laugh. We needed to talk. And it was like in the quiet moments where like I would scroll on TikTok and, watch someone, go through the same thing and, just sit there and like cry. And there's like you know, there's a video and it's like imagine getting to heaven and hearing a voice you never heard saying
Oh
like
my
hi
gosh, yeah.
mom, and like it like kills me. And everyone kept calling this a miscarriage, and I will never underestimate a miscarriage
Right.
ever, because that is something that I pray I never experience. um but this was almost so much more,
Mhm.
um just for what my body was going through, like.
Yeah.
And then you also feel, which I'm sure, like as a miscarriage, like someone who had a miscarriage, you feel the same level of like guilt and being
Yes.
like, this is my body. My body did it. Like my body is the shameful one. Like the doctor had told me that apparently, and again, like I have no issues. I don't have endometriosis. I don't have PCOS. I don't know where this came from. But apparently my fallopian tube had scar tissue that had
Oh,
adhered to my pelvic bone and it twisted.
oh, interesting.
So yeah, so like that was, I guess the reason. I don't know if it was when I got pregnant that it happened. I don't know if it was after I got pregnant. I don't know what it was. But
There's so
that's what
many unknowns.
so many. And my OB just said, like, I went in there and you were all twisted. She's like, but I went through your right side. She's like, you're completely clear. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, thank you. So like we went back a week later after my surgery and she's like, listen, she's like, after your next period, she's like, you guys can start trying. She's like, I had no problem. Now, easier said than done,
Yeah.
because that was in November and we still haven't tried. But also
It's
because I'm not
traumatic to think about.
ovulating.
Yeah,
Very.
you have to have a level of courage to try to conceive again. And
Yeah.
you have to be ready to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. So in the beginning, I was like, okay, cool. Like, we're going to start. Like, this is good. This is good. And then you sit there and you're like, but what if this happens again? And
Yep.
then what happens if I lose my other tube? And then what happens if we can't have a baby? What happens if this causes me to have infertility? What if this causes me to like, and you just sit there and you think, and like the one thing I think I'm very grateful for through this was, just like leaning on my faith, and like everyone's different. And my husband was not a very religious person, or like I guess faithful person, not even religion, like just faithful. And then when we got married in the Greek church, he took a liking to the priest, who was like a cool guy. He's married with 2 kids, like, and a wife, and like, he's a normal guy. And I think his friendship with him, like, we like have gone to church like for the last 5 weeks, and like we go, and now it's like our Sunday morning routine, and we go and we like enjoy it. And just like to get my husband to like pray with me at night is like so weirdly intimate, and it's great. But I like said, that's the only thing I feel like I have to have, because I have to have hope that it'll be okay again.
Yep.
And everyone is different, so like I can't fault people for like not falling to their faith, but like for me, that was what really has helped me. And I like told our priest, like I told Father John, I said, I know that God's going to restore. Because in the interim of everything happening to me, like I went to the church a lot, just to pray, in an empty church. And like, it's very like quiet. And, I was texting with the priest, and he's like, come in, I'll say a prayer. And he said a prayer. And then after my surgery, I had gone in, he said a prayer for me. And I looked at him and I said, I know God's going to restore. And he's like, how do you know? Like, how do you know? And I was like, I have Matthew. I was like, because I lost my late fiance and now I have Matthew. And I was like, he restored that for me. He restored all of that. So I was like, so I know when I go to have a baby again, like I will be restored. Like there will be something. So we're like getting into I'm testing my LH like every other hour, which is so bad. Because I told my husband, I was like, I'm not doing that. Meanwhile, I have like my, BBT monitor on the way, my thermometer on the way.
Yeah.
But I'm 35, so
if that helps you through the journey, then that's completely okay. I remember being in that space doing the exact same thing. Yeah, it's a wild ride, but I do feel like you are meant to have your husband. Your prayers were answered, and that's amazing that you've leaned in on your faith. And I just want to take a moment and say how brave you are to be sharing your story at such an early point. I mean, it's only been a couple months, and it took me a while to like fully share my story and get out there. So your positive outlook is amazing and definitely inspiring.
Thank you. Yeah, I try. Like when I had lost my late fiance, like I told like everyone was like, how are you so happy and smiley? And I was like, I'm not, don't get me wrong. Like I have my days. There are days, and how many bridal showers I had to go to knowing I never would have had one. Like, I didn't have one and my mom was planning it, and that always killed me inside. And like, but I truly believe like we have to be happy for other people and we have to be joyful. And like so many, like my sister-in-law, my husband's wife is my husband's wife. That's me. My husband's sister is pregnant, and like we're gonna have a niece in the end of June, and like my cousin's pregnant, and like all these people around me are having these blessings. Like I am going to 2 baby showers in March, like the first and the second. And I was like, why would I do this to myself? But at the end of the day, like when it's my turn, I pray that these people are there for me. So I have to think of it like that. But like I definitely have my days where like I sit there and I'm like, why did this happen to us? Like you said, it'll be 3 months on the 25th. So like it's still new. Like I still look at my body and I'm like, oh my God, I have scars. Like, like I literally told my husband this morning, I was like, I can't get over like looking at myself and seeing this. Like it's just so like you don't think about it, and all of a sudden you're like getting out of the shower and you're like, oh, okay, all right. There's 3 scars on my body that were never there before. And I just think too, like in one thing that like I struggled over the weekend and a lot like the week before, because a lot of people like I don't talk politics. I never do. And I think there's just such an insensitivity that comes with losing a baby in this kind of way. Because like every time I talk to people, it's never like, oh, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. I'm so sorry this. It's more like, well, thank God we live in New York. And I'm like, I never thought of that. I was like, I never thought, like, as I was literally dying, I had like 3 shot glasses worth of blood in my abdomen. Like, luckily I didn't have more. And like, I never thought politically about this. I just thought I need to be saved. My baby wasn't viable. Like, it sucks. And I think that like just in the climate that we're in, everyone is so quick to like turn it. And I'm like, this was my baby. This was my hope. This was like my dream. Like this was, as much as I say, like we love to enjoy our Sundays, nice and quiet on the couch. Like I would kill to have my hands full. I would kill to have all of that. So it's just like, it's a lot of different things at once. It's like a lot of different like emotions. And I actually help out at like a lawyer's office. And when I do, they're in the same office as an OB. So like I literally get in the elevator with like pregnant women and they're just like, hey, how are you? And I'm like, not good. Fantastic. I'm doing great. I'm crying inside. Good luck at your appointment. I pray everything is good. But like
there's a lot of triggering things out there that people have no idea would be triggering.
None. And like I am so sensitive to like you said, like what people are going through. And I think it's because I went through a lot, like since I was 28, like for the last almost 7 years. And like, I know that like, this person at the cash register who can't get their life together, like may just be having a bad day. Something may be going on. So I try to like pick up on the sensitivity of people. But as for like me, sometimes I feel like people aren't so sensitive around me. And I'm like, that's because I know that I smile, but like, it hurts. But I think also too, like to segue into something else, like I don't think people understand the magnitude that it puts on your partner. So like my husband, strongest man I've ever met in my entire life, has been through a lot in his life. This broke him. And while I was getting out of the trenches, he was falling into the trenches. And it hit him like a month later. And it was a lot of like, how are we ever going to like be a couple again in our ways? And like, I don't say this because I like want to have a big head, but like we're a great couple, and like he's my peace, like he's my calm. And luckily he still is, but to
Mhm.
have your calm, like, so upset, and
Yeah.
like you be so upset at the same time, it's like so hard. But like, I don't think people ever talk about like how it could affect them, like, as well. Um,
Yeah,
because it rocks them.
mhm. I can relate that to my husband and I as well.
Yeah.
And I think the thing with that is our partners are so focused on making sure we're okay
Yeah.
afterwards and through
Yeah.
recovery that they are selfless in that sense
Mhm.
until it does finally hit them.
Yeah.
You said it hit your husband a month later. It took my husband a year, and
Wow.
he he struggled so deeply that he ended up going to therapy, and he
Hmm.
still goes to therapy over 3 years later just because it has helped him so much. But I do
Yeah.
agree. I think people don't talk enough about how the partners
Yeah.
experience that trauma.
Yeah, and I think because it happened like to us and like our bodies, that
Mhm.
we are the ones that everyone needs to like look after. And while we are, like, I still think we are, like, I'm not saying we should be left in the dust, but like in those moments, like, my husband was helpless. Like, the person he loves the most, like, and I tell him all the time, I'm like, if that was you and the roles were reversed, I would be a mess. Like,
Mhm.
just to like witness like you getting wheeled in, and you're like, like your head is down, you can't look up, you're not like yourself, and you're going through all this and like getting put under and doing all of it. Like, if I had to see you go through that, like, I would be a wreck. So like,
Yeah.
it is okay that you are a wreck. Like, I get it. So like, I feel like, yeah, like you said, like, no one talks. Like, he did end up going to therapy. He goes like every other week now, which is very good because I, think that men need to do it. And I
Yeah.
think one thing it also taught him too was like, not in an insensitive way, but like when you would see someone who had miscarried or had a baby lost, like, you are like, oh, okay, I'm so sorry, like, and I pray that they get their baby, and like, you move on.
Mhm.
As you, when it
Yeah.
happens to you, like, when it happens to you, you are opened up into this whole big different world. And he's now like understanding that and learning that, and like, no pregnancy is easy. No pregnancy is, they're gonna have their crap. Like, you're gonna go through a lot. And that's why every baby that is born is straight up blessing,
Mhm.
and a miracle, to be honest. So like, I just think, oh, my battery's low. I just think that, like, he had learned to like take care of his mental health. And I think that, while we went through a lot of stuff, like, there was so many blessings that weirdly came out of it.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
like, maybe we weren't ready to have our baby. Did we have to go through what we went through? No, but I don't know, I don't know.
There, like we said earlier, there are so many unknowns with
Yeah.
an ectopic pregnancy, and it truly does change your life. Uh,
Yeah.
there are some positives around it. Like I just have,
Mhm.
there's so much perspective around life for me
Yeah.
after going through it. I think I realized who my true friends are and who
Mhm.
are actually there for you during the hard times. Um,
Right.
but there are also a ton of negatives around it. But I think it's important to just continue to share our stories and
Yeah.
educate the world because nobody knows what they don't know. And if we don't
Exactly.
share stories, then no one's going to know what the real experience is like. So
Yeah, I agree.
I appreciate you hopping on, Stephanie,
Thank
and being
you.
vulnerable and courageous
Thank
for sharing.
thank you.
Is
Thank
there
you.
anything else that you'd like to say as we end this?
Um, you know, I have so many thoughts in my head, and this was so good to like get out there and share my story. And I think a lot of people suffer in silence when they go through stuff like this. And I think my best piece of advice is to not go in silence. Everything that you're going through in life, like, people are private people, and I understand that and I respect that. But lean on your people. Like, don't be so ashamed that this happened. Don't be hiding that it happened. Because I don't think I could like get through it without my like little army. And I just know that, you know, whatever everyone's experience is with baby loss, we have this group that like no one ever wants to be a part of. But if I learned anything from like being a part of my widow group, is that strength comes in numbers, and I would never be able to get through my life without them. So now just like having a community and being able to like talk about what we went through, and you know, my body's never going to be the same, my mind is never going to be the same, my relationship is never going to be the same. And I was like even like thinking of like posting something and being like, Matt and I broke up with our old selves. Like, we basically broke up with our old selves. Like, now, you know, we see kids crying in the grocery store and we're like, that's a blessing. They're crying. We're good. Like, that's so good. They're here. Like, and everyone's, you know, journey to motherhood is different. Everyone's motherhood is different. And I know that it's not easy, but I can't wait for that not easy. Like, I cannot wait for that to happen. But I know that there's some plan, and whatever that plan may be, we're just going to go for the ride. But I really thank you for having me on here and letting me talk and letting me express it, because I haven't really done that too much, you know, with social media. So I think this is like my little step of like getting my story out there.
Yeah, I'm happy to be that step with you, and I will pray and be hopeful for you guys in the future.
Same to you. Same to you. I know you have your little one too, which is so nice to see.
Yeah, thank you.